Hi and welcome to this episode, which is all about solar. And my goodness, Pete's been thinking about solar for the last couple of years, planning, thinking, planning, talking, chatting, thinking. Here's a picture of Pete planning on the beach in Ecuador. Here's a picture of Pete thinking about solar on a rock outside Ravana Cave in Sri Lanka. Oh, and what's he doing at the top of Ella Rock at sunrise? He's thinking about solar. Enjoy.
So as you can see, Sally told me I've been thinking about it or planning it really for over 2 years. And the first question I ask myself is, why do we want the solar? And I think that's the first question you have to ask yourself if you're going to install solar. Why do you want it? And what are you actually trying to achieve? Are you trying to produce the maximum amount of power that you can with the roof space so you can sell it back to the grid? Are you trying to just cover a certain item? And for holiday homes, covering a pool perhaps. A pool pump is a really good use of solar. Or do you want to be self-sufficient and try and be off-grid as much as possible? So the why leads you to basically understand what sort of system that you need. And for us, we wanted to try and predominantly be self-sufficient, really. We were trying to be water self-sufficient, we want to be electrically self-sufficient. The next one here, in our particular location, we have power cuts. Not large power cuts, not a long time, maybe half a day, maybe even a day sometimes, but it's really annoying. So we wanted to have the ability for our system to cover the power cuts when they happen. And lastly, we wanted to be off-grid capable. Ideally, we would like to draw no power from the grid, but having worked the problem out, we're probably not going to be able to do that just because of the amount of solar we can put on our roof. Now you've asked the question why, you've got to ask yourself, what sort of system am I going to fit? And there are really 3 systems that are available. There's the grid-tied system. It's the simplest system. You have solar panels, a small grid-tie inverter, and it just produces AC electricity to the house. Any excess can be fed back to the grid if your country or operator allows you to. However, with a grid-tied system, if the grid power goes down, you basically have a blackout, it doesn't produce any electricity. So you'll have no power in the house. So for us, that wasn't a player. But for maybe if you had a pool pump or you wanted to cover something like that for a holiday home, perfect system, runs during the daytime, cover the power supply, half your electricity bill. The next system is a hybrid system. So it's similar to a grid tie, except this time you put a battery on it. So it allows you to either store excess energy rather than sell it back. And some hybrid systems will allow you to have what's called an EPS function, an emergency power supply function, which means that when the grid goes down, it will power very limited items, perhaps lights and a few sockets. It can't run the house. So it's basically the next step up. You can actually allow the battery to sell excess energy back to the grid as well if you can actually do that. Again, for us, not really suitable for us. Then we come to the off-grid systems, 2 sorts of off-grid system. There's an AC-based system, which basically means that solar always produces DC, it's then converted to AC, used in the house or stored by converting it back to DC again into the batteries. Now obviously you've got a conversion from DC to AC, then AC to DC, and then when you want to use the electricity again, it's got to go from DC back to AC. So you've got at least 3 conversions which lose energy in an AC-based system off-grid. So generally most off-grid systems are not AC-based, they're generally DC-based. And that's probably where we're coming from. And our system will be an off-grid system, but it's really a hybrid off-grid system because we'll be grid connected. So in the winter time, if we can't produce enough, the grid will supplement what we can produce. And I estimate that we should be self-sufficient for probably 10 months of the year. So a hybrid off-grid system, panels produce DC, it's stored directly in the battery as DC, and when you need it, the DC comes from the batteries, goes to the inverter and it produces AC, so there's only really one conversion. So that's the system that we're going to go for. Off-grid capable, power supply goes down, house still works. That's what we're trying to achieve. Okay, so when we got the house 2 years ago, before we actually had all the renovations done, we were already I was already thinking, so Tally told me, for the last 2 years about making it electrically efficient before we put in the solar. So there's no point in putting solar on if you've got all of these items in the house that are going to just draw power. So part of that was inside we've got a water boiler actually inside the kitchen, 200 litres. It's an air source heat pump boiler. It only pulls about 700 watts. A normal boiler will pull about 3,000 watts. And in Europe, we have energy rating certificates on each of these items, and it ranges from A to G. A is the most efficient, and this one here is an A-rated boiler, so very efficient indeed. Some of our items are so efficient they're A triple star, so they're even better than A. We've even gone down to the limits of this is our tea and coffee corner. Obviously Sally's great coffee machine that she likes. The kettle and the toaster, 800 watt low energy kettle. 1,000 watt low energy toaster. So even the small items, we've tried to keep it down as much as possible as well. Inside the main house, this is the extension that we've put on. We've put on an external air source heat pump, which is outside. It's a 6.5 kilowatt unit, and that powers the underfloor heating. And we have two blowers, which is one that blows into the lounge and one that blows into the kitchen. And we've been using this in the wintertime already, and it puts it at about 21, 22 degrees in here. And the unit outside, the big air source heat pump, is a 6.5 kilowatt unit, and it's A triple star rated. And this is our main 6.5 kilowatt external air source heat pump, which puts the heating and cooling into the lounge, into the underfloor heating and also the two blower units. Energy rating down here. And this, for the heating and cooling, is A triple star rated. So again, once it's up and running, probably not going to pull more than 6 amps, 1200, 1500 watts. And then it basically runs itself down. So it'll be even less when it's running. It will go up and down. So that'll be the maximum 1500 watts. And it'll probably come down to less than 1,000. This has been slightly oversized by myself because I'm a sort of belt and braces man. So even when you get full heating or full cooling, it'll only be running at about 70% capacity. In our bedroom, we had a bit of a problem. The walls are over 1 metre thick of natural stone. So to put a heater cooler unit in there, we've got a split air source heat pump where the unit is outside, but the head is inside. And this here we'll put this room up to about 23 degrees within 10 to 15 minutes. The unit is so efficient. This one here, as you can see here, we've got an energy rating on it. Again, it's an A triple star rated unit, and this pulls about 4 amps. It's about 700 watts. So again, it's about 9,000 BTU for cooling. It's about 4,500 watts for heating, and it only pulls about 4 amps.
And it makes it cosy toes in the winter.
Yeah, Sally very much likes it. It's got a remote control, which I've put by the side of her bed, so she can actually do it from the bed as well. Okay, we're in the lavanderier, and again, it's separate to the house. It's the conversion you see one of our YouTube episodes. And this here is another air source heat pump cooler heater unit. This one is all internal. It's all internal here, and it's the smallest of the units. But again, it's in the heating mode, it's about 3 kilowatts. Cooling mode, it's about 6,500 BTU, which cools and heats this room really nicely. And again, only pulling 3 to 4 amps, talking about sort of 700 watts, which is fabulous. And the last of the items we've got is we put in a separate air source heat pump boiler. It's 80 litres. This is just for the lavanderier. It's perfect for 2 people when they stay in here. You can do at least 4 or 5 showers with it. And this one is a double star. And rather than 3,000 watts, it uses around about 250 watts. So it really is super efficient. So again, great bit of kit. The only problem is it does make a bit of noise when people are sleeping in here. So we ask them to turn it off if they get disturbed by the noise, because it cycles on and off.
Which is why it's only at 30 degrees at the moment.
Because somebody left it off because we got
and forgot to turn it back on again.
So I'm just about to turn it back on. Like that.
Like that is one you prepared earlier.
Yeah. The next step in your solar really planning is to figure out how much energy you're going to use in your house. And for us, because you've already seen that we've made it as electrically efficient as possible, what I did is I made a spreadsheet here and itemised everything that we had, and then I would say how many hours it's going to run in a day, how many days of the week, whether it was summertime or wintertime, or there's actually an intermediate time. Then I came up with how much power I estimate that we're going to need per day for the different months. So for us, it broke down into basically 3 periods. We have the summertime, basically July to September, where we're going to run the pool pump, which draws a lot of power because it's running for 8 hours a day, and we're going to cool the house because it's blisteringly hot here during the summertime. So that brings out the biggest power requirement we have. Then we have sort of April, May and October, which we're still going to run the pool pump, but we're not going to have to heat or cool the house. So that's not too bad. And then we have the winter time, November to March, which not going to run the pool pump, but we're going to have heating, and that produces the least amount, well, the second least amount of energy required. Once you've got all those, then what you need to do then is figure out how much you're going to need energy-wise to make those numbers and how much battery storage. So now we're talking about solar production. The hardest thing to do in solar is to try and be self-sufficient over the winter time. You only get 3 hours of sunshine, so therefore, you know, in the summertime you might get 7 or 8, so you're significantly reduced on how much you can produce. I worked out our figures based on what I think the maximum we could have, and we can be self-sufficient for probably 10 months of the year. The only reason we can't do it in the winter time is because I don't have unlimited space on the roof to put the panels up there. And obviously the system increases in cost. So the blue line here shows you how much power required to run the house, and the orange line is how much power I reckon that we can produce based on the research that I've done. If you had the ideal setup, you could use less panels during sort of April, May and October, slightly more panels in November, in the summertime, and in the winter time you need much more panels. So it's just a sort of pictorial really to show you you have excess energy, how many panels you need, and it varies. So unfortunately we can't sell back to the grid. So I had to sort of do the best thing that I could do, and we're going to try and put 12 panels on. So we're going to be slightly out November, December, and probably January. But again, it depends if my figures are right or wrong. So now that we've done all the planning, we're going to look at our system. And the first thing is solar panels. How many can we stick on the roof? Okay, we're up on the roof here, and one of the big things about solar is how many panels you can get on the roof. And it would have been great if the roof was flat, but it's not. We've got a roof area just to our left, which is above the extension, which we're going to put 4 panels on. The roof here, which is the biggest part of the roof, we're going to try and put 8 panels on this part of the roof. And I would have loved it if I could have used the panels in the area in front of me, but we've got great big domes in the bedrooms, so you can see they're actually raised up, so I can't use this bit here. The great thing about this roof though is it's completely south facing. South is in that direction, so from a solar panel point of view it's great because it is perfectly south. So up here we're going to hopefully squeeze in 12 panels, 4,920 watts. Because of the roof space, I came up with the Q-Cells 410 panel, which is a really good low light panel, and it's the right shape. It's 1722 millimeters by 1100 millimeters, means I can put 12 on the roof, and that's the maximum that I can do. Again, just short of 5,000 watts. The inverter we're going for is Victron. Love Victron. Used it on all our boats. Really good quality stuff. Victron Easy Solar 48 5000 250 100 MPP charger. It allows us to actually power the house primarily off grid, but also be supplemented by the grid in the winter time when we may not generate enough electricity.
This is our spare room.
It was a bit quick. Take two.
You wouldn't know it, but this is a spare room for people to sleep in. But Pete's taking it over with all his electric stuff. Just as well we've got no one coming to stay, isn't it, in this room. This box here is the inverter. And we went on our 3-day, what's normally a 3-day drive down from the UK to Puglia. We spent 4 days because the first day we went up to Eindhoven in the Netherlands to pick this up because we saved €1,500 by doing that on this piece of kit. Really important piece of kit. Just really bad luck because we picked the day that a mains gas line pipe in Eindhoven, they decided it was in danger of disintegrating and exploding. So they had to evacuate a large area. 1,500 people had to move out of their homes and offices. And they closed the major roads in and out of Eindhoven. So it added another 2.5 hours to our journey, which we weren't expecting. And the saving grace was at least the place we picked this up from wasn't within the evacuation area. So always think on the bright side.
And you do like my electrical bits scattered around, don't you?
It's a trip hazard city in here at the moment.
I've got to be careful.
I can't wait for this solar system to just go up. Just get it done.
That's not very nice.
I've been living with it, literally, falling over it.
As for the battery, we ended up with a BYD LVS 8. Went down for this battery for several reasons, but the primary reasons is how much amps it can give up. It can actually give a continuous amperage of 185 amps, which means that even if the inverter had to peak out and produce, it can produce 9,000 watts at a peak mode, the battery can supply it. It's also modular, so if necessary I can expand it from 8,000 kilowatts to 12,000 kilowatts. I'd like a bigger battery, except it's just too expensive. So to finish off then, our system is going to be a hybrid off-grid DC based system. Heart of it is the Victron inverter. We're going to use a BYD battery because it can give up so much amps, and I'm going for Q-cell panels on the roof because they're really good low light and they're the right size for me to put 12 on the roof, which is the maximum I can fit up.
Okay. So you've made it to the end of this episode. Congratulations, and we really hope you found it useful. If it's any help or comfort, I get baffled by this stuff, and we're going to leave you with a bit of a light note, a bit of humour. It was a short clip that I took while we were coming back from Costa Rica last August, so 9 months ago, and if you can stick it to the end of that short video, it's only about a minute and a bit, you'll see the expression on my face because that was at breakfast time before I'd actually had a morning coffee, and it gives you an insight into the kinds of conversations that we've been having for about 2 years now. Hope you enjoy the last bit of fun on this video.
They're not conversations, Sally, they're one way, I think.
One way. And if you did like the video, do give us a thumbs up. We'd love it if you subscribed. Not all episodes are going to be like this. We do have quite a lot going on here apart from solar, but it was also a big part of the project. So thank you for watching. So Pete, we're about to buy 10 solar panels. Can you try and explain in layman's words what that gives us, please?
Right. You have to maximise the amount of amps that are put into the battery in the system. So the 10 panels that I've chosen produce, on a bright sunny day, produce 36 volts each and 13 amps. So two 5 series would produce 205 volts and 26 amps. So this 205 volts and 26 amps now goes to the solar charge controller. So the solar charge controller accepts 205 volts and 26 amps, then converts it to 52 volts to charge the batteries, which equates to 103 amps. So this is now converted from 205 volt 26 amps to 52 volts and 100 amps. It then goes to the batteries then will take out the 100 amps, but it takes out 48 volts, sends it to the inverter, which then convert it to 4,800 watts of power. It's now 4,800 watts of power at 230 volts, which is the equivalent of 22 amps. So that means that you could run the air source heat pump, which maximum will pull 11 amps, but it'll probably pull about 6 or 7 amps running air, and you're going to have enough with probably around about 13 to 14 amps to spare, which means that we can run the air source heat pump and charge the batteries and run at night.
Thank you.